This is a Q&A lesson on practicing, and thanks to all my Patreon followers for submitting questions. In fact, there were so many questions that I'm making multiple videos to answer them all, so this is part 2. You can find links to part 1 and part 3 in the description below. Also, follow the lessons for free and just pick up all the tips, but if you're interested in supporting the site, you can visit our support page. There's a link for that as well. So let's dive right in. So Cliff asks, how important are scales and to a lesser extent exercises? My teacher doesn't assign scale or exercise practice per se. In his opinion, you learn what you need from the music. I studied classical piano and scales are a fundamental part of that instrument. Excellent question, Cliff. And there's lots of different opinions on this matter, of course. Maybe less so these days, but in one way, I'll say, if you're studying with someone, listen to your teacher, of course. But let me explain a little bit. I do make a lot of technique exercises out of my pieces, and pieces themselves can teach you a lot of technique. But I think that exercises and scales, they more easily allow you to create a plan for both your maintenance and the improvement of your playing. They're very efficient at it. They're also an avenue into learning music theory on your instrument and all sorts of things like that. But the first thing I'll say is that exercises and scales are very efficient. They're very small and short, and they allow you to go over a great amount of technique material and knowledge material in a very short period of time. So in a 20-minute technique routine, you can cover a lot of different combinations of fingerings. You can go through scales and you can practice your IM fingering in rest stroke and free stroke, your MA fingering in rest stroke and free stroke, 3-finger combos, all sorts of things like that. You can go over multiple arpeggio patterns and cover all the different finger groups and different patterns that you might want to cover in a very efficient way. For example, that one exercise there from my technique book covers, PI arpeggios, PM arpeggios, PA arpeggios. Very efficiently within a very short period of time. You can go over slurs and cover every finger combination. Sometimes in repertoire, you won't always get 3-4 slur patterns. So finger independence covers, each finger group. Barre practice, there's just so much, there's so much evenness and thoroughness to covering all the different finger groups in exercises. And some exercises are even just really designed to improve your playing and to make you think about, your technique in a different way. And, etudes are very useful for this, and etudes are very important because they combine technique and musicality in a very meaningful way. So you want to make sure that you're also doing that. But I really think that, exercises and scales are just incredibly useful because they're always there for you. If you just include a 15 to 20 minute technique routine at the beginning of your practice session, you will cover so much maintenance of your technique and all the different finger groups in such a short period of time, and you can just make sure you always do that, and you'll always be getting lots of maintenance and improvement in your playing. As you know, scales are an avenue towards music theory. They teach you your key signatures. They also teach you reading patterns. So if you know your scale patterns in different positions, then when you read music in that position, you have an idea of what fingering to use. So it combines the scales and the position reading on the guitar especially into one thing. So if you look at the Aaron Shearer scale supplement book, there's 240 pages of scales matched with sight reading, and that's because those two things are very important to each other. The other thing that I would say too is that I would love to say that music study is 100% about your enthusiasm of playing music. But, a small part of music study is really athletics. It's physical athletics. And sometimes, not all the time, of course, but sometimes it can be very useful to just put the music aside for a second and to really look at your body and your technique practice, and to have some consistent exercises that you practice over a long period of time that are always there for you, and allow you to really focus on your technique and making sure that you're not leaving out any finger combinations in your practicing, which is really easy to do with repertoire. So yeah, obviously I think it's important to practice scales and exercises. I'm definitely supportive of that for a portion of your practice session, a small portion of your practice session. But other teachers will have different opinions. And as always, I recommend that you trust in your teacher. Your teacher might have certain goals for your unique development, and you do have to trust your teacher. It can be very beneficial to trust your teacher and get everything you can from them and their knowledge. Okay, Zachary asks, to what extent do you think it's good to spend time on polishing pieces before moving on to other pieces for late beginners and intermediate students? He says, I'm never sure how long to spend polishing a piece to the extent possible. Once I've gotten to like 80 to 90% fluency with it before I move on. Does this extra time with a piece have pedagogical value, or is it time better spent working on a new piece? Another great question. And in this particular case, it really depends on your practice materials as a whole and how you've structured your practice sessions as a whole. A large portion of your practicing should be on things that you can play at a high quality level. The more you play at a high quality level, the more your hands get used to playing high quality. You know, if you're working on new material, because you're like still learning it, you might be making more technical mistakes, and those technical mistakes find their way into your muscle memory. You want the majority of your practicing to be really high quality playing so that your muscle memory is just high quality. You know, playing close to the frets with curved fingers, you're paying attention to the quality at all times. So therefore, a large portion of your practice time should be on pretty high polished pieces and trying to bring them even higher quality, to bring your playing to the highest possible quality level that you can do, so that your body and your mind learn to play like that as often as possible, you know. And that's not always easy to do with newer pieces. One thing you can do is, of course, learn lots of short, easy pieces so that you can, you know, maybe memorize them quickly and really focus on your technique. That can help you turn over your pieces more often if that's important to you. But I really think that most students should stick with their pieces much longer than they think. If you study with a good teacher and they're preparing you for concerts, you'll have a certain amount of material that you cycle through to gain new knowledge and reading skills and all sorts of stuff. But then you'll have a core amount of repertoire, and you'll keep that core repertoire, you know, all year long, sometimes a year or 2 years long, and you'll really bring it up. Because the one thing you'll find is as soon as you perform it for your teacher or you perform it in a concert, that you'll have wished that you practiced it longer, and something that seems polished in the practice room might not be very polished on the concert stage. And so taking your pieces, polishing them in the practice room, and then playing them in front of someone will require even more polishing. And it's not just about learning to perform. It's also that when you perform in front of people, often your technical weaknesses come out the most. So it might not feel great sometimes that you go in front of people and certain things stop working, but it's usually a sign that there's actually an issue with that element. So it can be useful to say like, maybe my, you know, slurs aren't as solid as they should be, or maybe my legato phrasing isn't actually as good as I thought. It sounded pretty good in the practice room because it improved from where it was, but then, you know, you play it in front of someone and you're like, it's so much better that it was, but is it actually really good yet? Like, as soon as you get in front of people, you start to realize like, maybe that doesn't sound as good as I thought. It sounds better than it was when I started the piece because I've made improvement, but it's not as good as it could be. And so polishing a piece for really long is very important. The other thing that you should remember is that you might get tired of a piece, but if you are able to switch your focus on what you're working on in the piece, often it can breathe new life into the piece and refresh it. So sometimes we get locked into our technique practice of a piece or a certain goal that we had, like just legato phrasing. But then we stop kind of thinking about dynamic phrasing, and just dynamic range. And so if we approach the piece again with a fresh view on maybe dynamics or a fresh view on rhythm, maybe we can breathe new life into the piece. So what you might want to do is take your piece, bring it to a high level, or what you think is a high level, and then start attacking the piece from different angles, like practice it with dynamics in mind, practice it with legato in mind, practice it with rhythm in mind, and see if you can invigorate the piece and bring your high quality playing up even higher. And I don't think it's dependent on your level, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate. I think it's more about bringing that level up. Sometimes with beginners have bad habits, so we do have to cycle through repertoire more often to leave those bad habits behind in whatever piece you were practicing and to start with a new piece. So make sure that you at least, before you let go of a piece, at least make sure you've accomplished some kind of goal that you were planning to accomplish. So that when you leave the piece behind, you can say, I've accomplished at least this. And then on my new piece, I will try to accomplish all the things that maybe I wasn't able to accomplish on that piece. Be careful with that. Make sure you're practicing easy enough repertoire that you can accomplish lots of goals. Next question. So Chris asks, when I practice exercises found in your classical guitar technique book, I experience a huge range in what I can and cannot readily do, depending on what techniques I'm working on. Some he can do well and some he can do less well. Is it necessary to have reasonably good facility in all the areas before moving on to a more advanced level? My professional answer as like a professional teacher is that yes, you do need to have a reasonably good facility with all of the areas of a technique routine before moving on. It's very much like a foundation issue. It's like you build the foundation and then on top of that you build more skills and more skills and more skills, but it's really dependent on the foundation that you build at the beginning. So what you do is you practice easy exercises in a variety of techniques. And then when you progress to the next level, you pretty much do the same techniques, but the difficulty of the exercise increases. So what you want to do when you're practicing easy exercises is to bring them to a high quality level. And then as you increase the difficulty of the exercises, you retain that quality level that you reached. So in order to progress to the next level, you'll be, increasing the difficulty of the exercises. So you want to make sure that all of the exercises all the easy exercises were accomplished very well before you move on. So that's my professional answer. On a more empathetic answer would be that yes, you can move on. Not everyone is in this for the same reasons. If you're professionally geared, you definitely want to accomplish every single exercise really well and get to the root of any problems. If you want to reach higher levels, and you're very determined to do that, then yes, of course, you have to learn all of the exercises and you have to keep focusing on those before you move on. You could increase the difficulty of one of the exercises that you do well. If you know your scales are pretty good, you can increase the difficulty of them while continuing to work on your barre exercises at an easier level. So you can mix and match exercises to build a customized routine for your personal unique development. But you also want to be careful that you're not letting certain things skyrocket ahead, because what you'll do is probably skyrocket ahead in your repertoire as well. But there will be some point in the future when you play a piece and your barres have to be good, even though your scales and your slurs are really good. And you'll have advanced so far in repertoire, but you'll have this real weak point that you haven't addressed properly. So that it's very important that you address those issues, because you will reach a level where it becomes an issue. And as a teacher, I've had lots of students come to me and they're playing very difficult pieces. Maybe they're playing at the grade 8 or 9 level in terms of repertoire, but they have these real serious problems with their technique. And I have to really say, like, in order to help you, we're going to have to lower your repertoire down to the grade 5 level in order to improve on those skills that you have maybe either avoided or just never accomplished. So, and it can be very, it can sometimes not feel great to the student to have to like reduce the level of the repertoire by so much, but it sometimes becomes necessary. So of course, having more balance as you progress will be very important in the ideal situation. For lots of people that are practicing guitar and music as a hobby, it won't be so perfectly balanced of an experience. If you work with a really great teacher, they will keep you more balanced and they will force you. But if this is your hobby, you will probably be advancing with lots of like different, certain things being really well accomplished and other things not. And that's understandable and that's okay. But again, you just have to realize that at some point that will be an issue. So make sure that at least as you increase some parts of your technique routine, don't give up on the easy barre exercises or the easy slur exercises that you haven't accomplished. You have to eventually accomplish those, so make sure you're addressing those issues as you go. It's a complicated question though. Okay, William asks, I've been following your presentation of the Source Studies Opus 60. I'm just putting those Opus 60 studies out there on YouTube right now. I'm doing lessons for all 60 and I have an edition of it. So he asks, at what point in a student's progression or development do you recommend inclusion into daily, weekly technique practice? How often during a week should additional items such as the soar be added without sacrificing work on one's repertoire studies? And would each soar study be seen as an additional piece of music to learn to enhance legato technique, or in itself, or additionally another step along the repertoire ladder? Okay, so that's a big question, but it will really depend on your unique development and where you're at. When you look at etude collections, there's a number of different ways you can approach them, and teachers will do this too. Either we approach them by choosing a specific study within the collection to address an issue in your playing, and then assign it to you so that you can use the piece to overcome that issue. Sometimes we use the studies for sight reading practice or just a repertoire. Sometimes the student just really likes the piece. Some of them are very excellent pieces, so we can just use them as repertoire. And then other people are going to be using them as in deciding that they're going to play all 25 studies in Opus 60. Which, of course, if you're going to do that, you should be at a later intermediate level. So, the first studies will be more easy, but as you progress, they'll get more and more difficult. But you're already at a level that's okay, that they'll be more difficult as you go. The advantage to studying an entire opus is that it really makes the student address issues in their playing. So by going over 25 pieces, and let's say their goal is to play more legato, those 25 pieces are all going to have different textures, and studying all those different textures and overcoming them will force the student to really address some issues in their playing and to improve. If we hand pick our pieces by just picking pieces we like, we can avoid problems very much. If we pick pieces that have no slurs in them for 5 years, then we might not have been practicing slurs in our etudes for 5 years, and that's of course bad. So by practicing an entire opus, it will force the student to really address issues that they might not have otherwise addressed, because some pieces they won't like and they might not prefer to play them, but if they're going to play the whole opus, they will play them and overcome that issue. So it's really up to you, William. If you would like to just pick pieces from it randomly, then by all means just do so. If you think you like one from the video, go ahead and play that piece and enjoy it. However, if you're looking to really accomplish a wide range of skills, then go ahead and try to play the whole opus if you're at the level to do so. So, if the collection ranges from grade 1 to grade 7, if you're going to play the whole collection, you probably want to be at least the grade 6 to 7 level already. And when you practice those easy pieces, they'll be, your quality level can be high. Now, if you're at like the grade 4 level or grade 3 level, then maybe you're going to decide to just play all the pieces up to your level. So I've kind of been grading them as I go. If you look on the purchase page, there's the list of lessons, and I put approximate grade levels next to each study. So you can say, like, I'm going to play all of the studies from grade 1 to grade 3 within Opus 60. So that might bring me up to etude number 10 or something like that. So you can decide to just do a good chunk of them. So there's lots of different ways to approach it. And in terms of daily or weekly practice, these are etudes. So, you have your technique practice. You can have an etude section of your practice session, and then you can have a repertoire section. And you should always be working on some etudes, or at least some pieces that explore some technique and musical ideas that you should work on. So yeah, just dedicate a portion of your practice session to that.